Major Garrett joins us now. He is CBS News' chief Washington correspondent. Major, thanks so much for being with us. The Inflation Reduction Act is a legislative accomplishment for President Biden if it clears the Congress. But what could the practical impact be on the midterms?
So, as the president just said, people are not going to notice their pocketbooks changing demonstrably between now and midterm election day because of this legislation. But the political effect will still be important, and here's why. As you well know, Nikole, because you spent so much time on Capitol Hill, Democrats have a functional majority. 50-50 in the Senate, very small majority in the House. The big question is, do they have a functioning majority? Can they agree among themselves on big-ticket items and deliver them to the president's desk? For months now, on this question of some variation of Build Back Better, the answer has been no. Democrats do not have a functioning majority. They cannot agree with themselves. They cannot deliver on big promises. And therefore, this sense of drift, this sense of paralysis pervaded the sentiments among Democrats. We can't get anything going. Now they have something going. What does that mean? Well, it proves that they've been able to make some promises on the campaign trail and now deliver on them, and energize not only the members in Congress here in Washington, but all those who are around them at the state level, at the local level. Hey, we've done something. We've made these things happen, and that energy will flow from Washington throughout the country. Does it change things in the polling? Is there going to be a huge bump for the president? I don't anticipate that. But within the party and within the conversation, the idea that things have gone from functional to functioning matters in a midterm election atmosphere like this.
And what makes this piece of legislation different from some of the president's other accomplishments in terms of appealing to voters? Are they going to be able to sell this?
Well, that's up to them to sell it. But what it's going to do is create for the Democratic Party a rationale, not just for the midterm election, but for 2024. And what's the rationale? Democrats have long said that you can place Medicare in a position of negotiating some prescription drugs without retarding or in any way inhibiting advancements in pursuit of pharmaceuticals and lower costs. Guess what? For the first time, we're now going to find out if that's true, because that's in the bill. Not all drugs, but some that are identified early on in this legislation. That's going to be a key test of not only a promise, but an idea. The other idea that Democrats have is that you can tax corporations, especially those that find ways to evade taxation, at a minimum corporate level, and that will raise revenue and not do anything that will hurt the economy. That's going to be tested in the next couple of years. And on green jobs and dealing with climate issues, there is now billions upon billions of dollars across the entire spectrum of green energy, renewable energy, and jobs initiatives. The Democrats have long said can do two things at the same time: grow the economy and combat climate change. That's going to be tested in the next 2 or 3 years. So this is not only a piece of legislation, Nikole, that will have a message tailored for the midterm elections. It will have a message tailored and with questions either asked and answered in time for 2024.
President Biden has struggled with a low approval rating, but in the past week, he celebrated a booming jobs report, announced the death of an al-Qaeda leader, and as you just mentioned, the Senate has passed some pretty key bills. Is that enough to energize the party?
It certainly should be, and if it's not, I don't know what else would. As presidential weeks go, not only for President Biden, but any president that I've covered, that's a very substantial week. Remember, all sorts of stories were being written, Nikole, 1-year anniversary of the Afghanistan withdrawal disaster. Those stories will still be written because many regard that as mishandled, to put it mildly. But there is now at least a different context around Afghanistan with the death of al-Zawahiri and the administration's pursuit thereof. That means, yes, this over-the-horizon counterterrorism strategy has some actual teeth to it, and this is proof of that concept. Plus, the CHIPS Science Act, which the president will sign tomorrow, surrounded not only by bipartisan members of Congress, but by corporate leaders, is the largest investment in chip manufacturing in this country and science in decades. That's a huge bipartisan accomplishment, also with job-creating potential. And the jobs report, plus what happened in Republican primaries last week in Arizona and Michigan, where it is regarded by many, including some in the Republican Party, that those who emerged as nominees may not succeed and may fare poorly in the general election. Plus the result, the somewhat surprising result on abortion in Kansas. All of those things last week sent signals to the country and to Democrats Things aren't as dire as they once appeared. Accomplishments are being put up on the board, and the president is getting a bit of a rebound.
And in terms of that abortion issue, especially after you mentioned after Kansas voters decided to protect abortion rights, is that something you think we'll see the president lean into more in terms of taking on some of these culture issues?
Absolutely. The president looked at that, as did many Democrats, and say, you know, we thought we had an even Steven chance, but the vote was lopsidedly in favor of protecting abortion rights. Many counties that former President Trump carried by substantial margins, more than 70%. In some of those counties, the vote to protect abortion rights was on the majority there, which was a surprising result, indicating that there is at least a mixed appraisal, even in ruby red counties, of how to deal with the question of abortion. This was the first sort of mini referendum on that. And if this is the way that Kansas looked at it, Democrats can fairly conclude in lots of other places, not universally, but in many places in America, it's at least a competitive issue and maybe a net positive issue. They feel the same way about certain issues dealing with gun regulation and certainly on other culture issues. But the abortion result in Kansas is definitely an elixir to Democrats who are wondering, does this have any political potential outside of our own sort of Democratic precincts? The results from Kansas suggest that it does.
And looking at the other side of the aisle, former President Trump spoke at CPAC over the weekend, where he again claimed the election was stolen, but he also teased his future plans. Let's watch.
But I ran twice, I won twice, and did much better the second time than I did the first, getting millions and millions of more votes than in 2016. And now we may have to do it again. We may have to do it again.
So if he makes it official and announces his intent to run before November, how could that impact the midterms?
I'll get to that in a second. First, he got more votes the second time. He did not win the presidency the second time. America, those are the two facts that matter. Former President Trump got more votes in 2020 than he did in 2016, but he did not win the election. It was not stolen. That must be said over and over again. Look, congressional Republicans looking at the week that was just had by President Biden and Democrats know that things are beginning to shift, and appraisals will shift with these accomplishments put up on the board by the president and his Democratic allies in Congress. They also know that one thing is true in all Trump-influenced cycles since 2016. Democratic energy is driven in part by their assessment, usually negative, of former President Trump. So if he enters the 2024 fray before the midterm elections, Democrats will also be able to say we have these accomplishments, and also, yes, former President Trump is now a candidate in 2024. You need to marshal your energy and your resources, not just for this midterm election, but as a preparatory signal for 2024. Most Republicans, even before the week that President Biden had last week, did not want former President Trump to be involved in this midterm conversation. My sense is, and based on some of the reporting I've done, is they feel that even more strongly now.
So is drawing a contrast with his predecessor a winning strategy for President Biden, or is it better for him to ignore the former president and focus on his own accomplishments, which we kind of saw during the 2020 campaign?
Well, Nikole, you've been on Capitol Hill. You've listened to Democrats talk about extreme MAGA Republicans and these extremists in the Republican Party, either with their legislative or political or election-denying agenda. That's going to continue. That's not going to take a backseat to anything. However, what the Democrats and President Biden now have, and remember, President Biden's not on the ticket in the midterm elections, but his congressional colleagues are. What they're going to say is, in addition to these extremists on the Republican side, their language, not mine, look at the things Democrats have done. And as Elizabeth Warren said this weekend, senator from Massachusetts, if you like the things you've seen in the Inflation Reduction Act, that's their label for it, or other legislative initiatives, elect more Democrats, because we can go even farther than that. So they'll have both. But they will not abandon this idea that former President Trump and Republicans are outside of the mainstream extremists, and they will talk about their agenda. The big difference, Nikole, is 2 weeks ago, they basically had an anti-message. Don't vote for those Republicans. Now they have, don't vote for those Republicans. Oh, look what we've done over here. That's why you should vote for us.
Well, Major Garrett, thanks so much for your insight and expertise. As always, good to have you.